Hey, what's up guys, it's Tristan from Pixel Labs, and today I'm going to be showing you how I edit our photos. Now it's important to note that yes, there are do's and don'ts to photo editing, but there's also a lot of room for creativity and subjectivity within the process, so keep that in mind, and this is just going to be my stylistic approach to how I would edit this specific photo. Today I'm going to be using Adobe Lightroom, so let's jump into it. So first off, as you can tell, this is sort of a dark photo. This was a long exposure taken in downtown Philadelphia. You got a lot of nice light streaks here and a lot of cool flares on the lights. So that's something you want to take into account. Also, the darkness level is something you want to take into account as well. So first thing I'm going to do is lower the highlights. Now that might seem a little bit weird because, you know, it has light in the title of the word highlights, and I'm lowering it to get a little bit darker feel. But actually what that's going to do is that's going to bring out a lot of detail in the overblown parts, especially in this clock as you see right here. So beforehand, kind of blown out, but now that I lower those highlights, you can get a little bit more detail there. After that, I actually like to raise the shadows a little bit. Again, this is bringing out more detail. You can see this pavement right here, a lot of these buildings, you're seeing a little bit more of it. And then after that, I like to raise the whites, and this is kind of how I brighten the overall image. I'm gonna raise those. As you can see, that is kind of getting a nice sort of saturated light effect. Next, I'm going to bring up the exposure. Again, this is just the overall exposure, and this kind of just lightens the image a little bit. You're seeing a little bit more detail in the clock tower right here. And then, to compensate for getting rid of the detail in some of those blacks, I'm going to lower the blacks a little bit. So a little bit more of a contrast, and then I'm going to do something with the contrast here to kind of boost that a little bit more. So as you can see, we have a vastly different picture already with just a few simple effects on the basic tools. Now I'm going to get into a little bit more technical things, so I'm going to get into an S curve here. So these are curves. This is again lightness. You know, you got the midtone, you got the whites, you got the midtones, and you got the shadows and the darks down here. I'm going to do a simple S curve, which is where I drag this right here, drag this down, and then drag this up, and it kind of makes an S shape. And from there you can kind of tweak and fine-tune the contrast and the brightness that you want in your photo. Next, we're going to get into HSL, which stands for Hue Saturation and Luminance. Now this is something I personally like to play around with a lot. I like to kind of create unnaturalistic colors in my image, but you kind of should gauge your situation on what you're actually creating a photo for. If it's for personal use, go crazy, do whatever you want. But if it's for a client, or if you're taking some more less creative work, maybe you know, portraits or something that is supposed to be kind of just a natural, not super crazy sort of thing, keep that in mind when you play with this tool, because you might want it to look a little bit more naturalistic. Now I personally like to skew my reds and my oranges a little bit pink on the side there. So I take this HSL slider. So right now I'm working with the hue. That's going to change the color. Effectively, it's going to change it to a different shade of red. If I'm working with the saturation, that's going to enhance or sort of increase the vibrance of the color. And if I'm working with the luminance, that's going to increase the lightness or the darkness of the color. So you can see it's brighter here, it's darker here. Actually, I like it a little bit more saturated, and decrease the luminance a little bit just to get a little bit of that flare effect out of there. Now we see we have some green in the photo. I'm going to edit that a little bit to make that a little bit more of a teal aqua color, because that's just kind of the color palette that I prefer. We have a lot of nice yellows and oranges here, and again I'm going to skew those towards the red end of things just slightly. Well, actually that's not very slightly, but that's how I like it. It's kind of like a cool stylized street effect here. And then you probably don't see a lot of it, but a lot of these colors, a lot of just general light usually registers as blue on the color scale. So if I do this with the blue, these street lights up here kind of skew into the teals, or I can make them a little bit more purple, which I think I will in this case. So as you can see, again, already with just messing with the colors and the basic image correcting, we have a drastically different photo than before. Now one final thing that I'll get to here is sharpening. Sharpening can just bring out the little fine details in your image. So if you see right here, we got some nice pavement on the ground, we have some nice windows here in the building, bring out a little bit of that. So it's important to know that when you're working with sharpening, you hold down the Option or the Alt key, and that can kind of show you the damage, or not damage, but what you're doing to the picture exactly. One of the more important things when working with sharpness is the masking, because that'll kind of dictate where you want the sharpness to go. So all that area that's black right now, that is not going to be sharpened, because that's kind of the not important details. I don't want to sharpen the sky, and I don't want to sharpen general parts of these buildings that are too dark. So we'll apply that, looking a little bit sharper. It's a subtle effect, but it does make a difference, especially if you see down this pavement right here. Turn it off and on. It's very subtle, but it's there. I'm thinking that's kind of how I want to leave this photo now. So again, this is a very stylistic approach. This is not something you apply to everything, but this is just my specific tastes and standards that I apply to when editing some of our photos and some of my personal photos. So take that into account, and if you have any tips and tricks from me that you'd like to share, feel free to let me know about those. I hope you got some new tools to add to your toolkit based on kind of the showcase of my photo editing, and keep on creating.